They said cowboys could never be trusted, yet one saved me. My heart belongs to him forever. The bullet hit the water trough 3 inches from Nora Calloway's hand. She did not scream. She dropped flat against the dry ground, pressed her cheek into the red dust of Crow Hollow, and counted. 1 shot. A pause, then 2 more fast from the ridge above the town's only road. The horses tied outside Harlan's general store went wild. A woman pulling her child inside slammed the door so hard the glass cracked. Nora stayed down. Her fingers found the small knife on her belt, the one her father had given her before he left and never came back, and she held it the way people hold things that cannot actually help them but feel better than nothing. Crow Hollow was not a town that expected trouble on a Tuesday. It was not a town that expected much of anything. 43 people, a church that leaned left, a sheriff who drank more than he worked, and one main road that wound through like it was embarrassed to be there. Nora had lived here for 3 years, long enough to know every face and short enough that nobody truly knew hers. She ran the schoolhouse. She kept to herself. She did not ask for anyone's help, not since the night she arrived on the eastbound stage with nothing but a carpet bag and a story she had no intention of telling. The shooting stopped. She counted to 10, then 20. The horses calmed to a nervous shuffle. She raised her head and looked toward the ridge. A rider came down, not from the ridge, from the opposite direction, from the flat open land west of town, moving at a pace that said he had heard the shots and was not running from them. He rode a dark horse the color of old charcoal, and he sat in the saddle the way some men sit in their own skin, like it cost him nothing. He wore a gray duster, trail-worn and road-colored, and the brim of his hat was pulled low against the late afternoon sun. He was not young. He was not old. He was the kind of man whose age lived in his eyes and nowhere else. Nora stood up. She brushed the dust from her skirt with one hand and kept the knife in the other. The rider slowed as he passed her. He looked at the water trough, then at the ridge, then at her hand. "You hit," he said. "No," she said. "The shooter's gone, took off north when I came around the flat." He did not look like he was asking for her gratitude. He looked like he was reporting weather. "You the schoolteacher?" She did not ask how he knew. There were only so many women in Crow Hollow who would stand in the street after being shot at and keep their chin level. "Yes," she said. "Wade Calloway's daughter." Her stomach pulled tight. She said nothing. He nodded once, like her silence was an answer he had expected. He turned his horse toward the hitching post in front of Harlan's and climbed down slow, the way men do when their knees have absorbed too many miles. His name was Cole Durant. She learned that much from Harlan, who came out from behind his counter the moment the door opened and started talking the way he always did when he was nervous, which was most of the time. Cole Durant had ridden through Crow Hollow once before, 2 winters back. A drifter, Harlan said, a hired hand, worked for cattle operations up and down the territory, kept no permanent address, owed no permanent loyalty. The kind of man, Harlan said, lowering his voice even though the man in question was standing 10 feet away looking at a shelf of canned peaches, that you did not fully trust. Nora heard all of this. She also heard what Harlan did not say, that Cole Durant had stopped when others rode past, that he had put himself between the open road and a woman standing in the street holding a knife too small to matter. Trust was a complicated arithmetic. She had learned that early. Her father had been trusted by everyone in their hometown, the deacon, the banker, the man who ran the feed store, the women who brought pies to church. Trusted and beloved. And then one morning he was simply gone, and the people who trusted him found out what trust had cost them. Nora had been 17. She had packed the carpet bag herself. So no, she did not trust cowboys. She did not trust drifters. She did not trust men who showed up from the west on dark horses and knew her last name. But she also did not walk away. She stayed in Harlan's longer than she needed to. She bought flour she did not need and a tin of coffee she already had. She watched Cole Durant study the shelf of peaches with the focused attention of a man who was not actually looking at peaches. "You passing through?" Harlan asked him. "Maybe," Cole said. Harlan laughed the nervous laugh. Nora turned to leave. "Miss Calloway," Cole said without turning from the shelf. She stopped. "Whoever shot at you today, they weren't trying to scare you." He finally turned. His eyes were the flat gray of creek water in winter. "They missed because they chose to, not because they're bad shots." Harlan went very quiet. Nora kept her face still. "And why would you know that?" "Because I've seen that ridge, 300 yards, clear sight line, no wind." he set a can of peaches on the counter. A bad shot misses, a good shot misses on purpose. That's a message, not an accident. She walked out. The sun was low and the road was orange with it, and her hands, she noticed, were shaking, not from fear but from the effort of not showing fear, which was its own kind of exhaustion. She did not look back at Harlan's store. She walked the 4 blocks to the schoolhouse, went inside, latched the door, and sat down on the floor against the wall where the children hung their coats. She sat there for a long time. Her father's name, the shots, the man who knew things he had no reason to know. Somewhere out in the territory, something was moving toward Crow Hollow. She had felt it for weeks, a pressure in the air, like the sky before a storm that does not come but also does not leave. She was not a woman who prayed. But she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes and said the only true thing she knew. She was not going to run again. Whatever was coming, she would stand here and face it. Crow Hollow was not much, but it was hers, and for 3 years it had been enough. Tonight, for the first time, she was not sure it still was. Cole Durant did not leave Crow Hollow the next morning. Nora saw his horse still tied at the livery when she walked past on her way to open the schoolhouse. The sight of it made something move in her chest that she immediately pressed down like a coal in a fire that had no business burning. She had 7 students that day, 3 brothers from the Hadley farm, 2 girls from the mining families up the hill, and a pair of quiet twins named Pete and Lou whose mother worked the laundry. She taught them long division and the names of the state capitals and a poem about rivers that she had memorized as a girl. She kept her voice steady. She kept her eyes away from the window. At noon, one of the Hadley boys, the oldest one named Cal, said there were men at the edge of town. "What kind of men?" she asked. "The kind," he said with the particular gravity of a 12-year-old, "that don't look like they're just passing through." She dismissed class early. By the time she reached Main Street, the men Cal had seen were already gone. But Sheriff Pete Allen was standing outside his office with his thumbs in his belt, and the look on his face that meant he had been told to look unconcerned and was failing at it. Pete Allen was not a bad man. He was simply a small one, small in the way that had nothing to do with his body, which was large enough, and everything to do with his habit of choosing the easiest available version of any situation. "Sheriff," Nora said. "Miss Calloway." He tipped his hat. "Heard about the incident yesterday. Sorry about that. Probably just some drunk fool from the mining camp." "It was not a drunk fool," she said. "It was a message." Pete looked at his boots. "Now I don't know that we can say. Cole Durant told me. He knows that ridge." Pete's face did something complicated. "Durant, yeah, he's still here." The tone did not commit to a feeling about this. "You know anything about him?" "Only what Harlan said." "Harlan don't know the half of it." Pete finally looked up. "Cole Durant used to ride for Victor Creed." The name landed like a stone in still water. Victor Creed. Everyone in the territory knew that name. A cattle baron who operated out of the northern flats. A man who had expanded his land holdings in ways that courts had failed to question and neighbors had learned not to discuss. 3 homesteads in the past 4 years had gone under, sold at prices that were not so much offered as dictated. 2 of the men who had refused had left the territory on their own 2 feet. One had not. Nora kept her voice flat. "Used to?" "Left his outfit 2 years ago." "Nobody knows exactly why." Pete pulled at the collar of his shirt. "Point is, a man who rode for Creed for 6 years doesn't exactly come out clean. And yet he's still here," she said. "Rather than gone." Pete didn't have an answer for that. She found Cole at the livery, not hiding, not particularly visible, just checking his horse's left shoe with the particular attention of a man who had learned to keep his own equipment in order. He didn't look up when she approached. He did look up when she stopped 3 feet away and stood there without speaking. "You rode for Victor Creed," she said. "I did. For 6 years. About that." She waited. He let the horse's hoof down gently and straightened. "You want to know if I'm still loyal to him?" "Are you?" "No." One word. No decoration. She looked at his face for the shape of a lie and did not find one, which meant nothing. The best liars were the ones you couldn't read, and she knew that from experience that had cost her more than she wanted to count. But there was something else in his face, something that was not guilt exactly but lived in the same neighborhood. A weight that had been carried long enough to change the posture of the man carrying it. "Creed is the one sending messages," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Because of my father." A pause, a small one, but she caught it. Wade Calloway worked for Creed. 3 years ago, he found something he wasn't supposed to find. A set of land documents, deeds that were forged not badly, but forged. Your father copied them. Planned to take them to a federal marshal. Her throat tightened. She kept it out of her face. Creed found out before he could. Your father ran. The documents went with him. Cole looked at her steady. Creed's men have been looking for those documents ever since. Or for someone who might know where Wade hid them. The carpet bag. It had sat under her bed for 3 years. She had never fully unpacked it, not in the way people do when they settle somewhere for real. Some buried animal part of her had always known. My father is dead, she said. I know. How? Because Creed's men found him 8 months ago up in the Northern Territory. Cole's voice did not change. The documents weren't on him, so now they're looking somewhere else. The schoolhouse, the floor under her bed. 3 years of quiet in a town of 43 people. The shots yesterday had not been a warning. They had been a test, a way of telling her that they knew where she was and that the next move was hers. She was aware that her hands wanted to shake again, and she did not let them. Why are you telling me this? She said. Cole looked at her for a long moment. There was nothing soft in his face. There was also nothing cruel. Because I was the one who told Creed your father had the documents, he said. 3 years ago, I didn't know what he'd do with it. A beat. I knew what kind of man Creed was. I told myself that was separate from what I did. It wasn't. The weight she had seen in his posture. Now she knew what it was made of. She walked away. She did not run. She walked, and the road was long, and the schoolhouse waited at the end of it like a thing that was hers and might not be for much longer. Inside, under the bed, the carpet bag sat in the dark. Inside the bag, under the lining she had never pulled back because she had never let herself look, her father's last act waited for someone brave enough or desperate enough to carry it the rest of the way. She sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, the sky was going red. She thought about trust, about the arithmetic of it, about what it cost and what it bought, and whether a man who had done wrong and knew it was worth the same as a man who had never done wrong at all, or whether those were even the same currency. She didn't have an answer. But she reached under the bed and pulled the bag toward her, and she finally looked. The documents were real. She had half hoped they wouldn't be, half hoped her father had imagined it or exaggerated it the way people sometimes did when fear got into them, shaping small things into large ones. But these were not small. 3 pages of forged land deeds, 2 letters in a handwriting she didn't recognize that laid out payment arrangements for a county clerk and a territorial judge, and a hand-drawn map with boundaries marked in red ink that did not match any legal survey she had ever seen. Her father had been meticulous. Of course he had. Whatever else Wade Calloway was, and she had spent 3 years building a wall around whatever else he had been a careful man. Every document was dated, annotated in his small, tight handwriting, cross-referenced with parcel numbers and legal descriptions that would mean something to a federal marshal and nothing to anyone else. He had done the work. He had just run out of road before he could finish it. Nora sat with the papers spread on the schoolhouse floor for a long time. The lamp burned low. Outside, Crow Hollow went quiet the way small towns do after dark. Not a peaceful quiet, but an empty one. All the business of the day withdrawn into houses, leaving the street to the wind and whatever it carried. She heard boots on the step before the knock came. It's Cole, he said through the door. She looked at the papers. She looked at the door. She thought about the fact that she was a woman alone in a one-room schoolhouse with documents that had already gotten her father killed, with men somewhere out past the edge of town who were not drunk fools and not bad shots. She opened the door. He came in without being invited further, which was something she catalogued and did not comment on, because he also immediately went to the window and stood to one side of it, looking out without being visible from outside, which was the behavior of a man who had spent time thinking about angles. She had not learned to do that herself. She was beginning to think she should have. You looked, he said. Yes. What's in there? She told him, all of it. She watched his face as she spoke, and what she saw was not surprise. He had known enough of the shape of it. But the specific, pressed-down expression of a man hearing confirmed what he had always suspected, and discovering that confirmation is not the same thing as relief. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. There's a federal circuit marshal, he said. Rides through Clayfield every 3 weeks. He's due in 8 days. Clayfield is 60 miles. Yes, she looked at him. You're suggesting we take these documents to Clayfield. I'm saying it's the only move that ends this. He looked at her directly. Creed has men in this territory, at least 6 that I know of, probably more. He knows you have the papers now, or he suspects it. If you stay in Crow Hollow, sooner or later they come for them and it doesn't go the way yesterday went. Yesterday they missed on purpose. They won't always. She folded the papers carefully and put them back in the bag. Her hands were steady. She was proud of them for that. You said you told Creed about my father, she said. I did. And you feel responsible for what happened to him. He didn't answer right away, which was its own kind of answer. Is that why you're here, to pay a debt? Cole looked at the wall behind her, the way people look when they're being honest about something they haven't said out loud enough times to be comfortable with it. Partly, he said. And partly because Creed needs to be stopped, and I've been looking for the thing that stops him for 2 years. He paused. And partly because you were standing in the middle of the street with a knife the size of a letter opener and you didn't even flinch. She almost smiled. She did not. If I ride with you, she said, I need to know that the man riding beside me is riding away from something or toward something, not both. He met her eyes. Toward, he said. She believed him. She did not know if believing him was wisdom or want, and she did not let herself pick it apart. There were 8 days and 60 miles, and a set of documents that her father had given everything to protect. There was a marshal and a courthouse and the end of Victor Creed's long reach if they could get there. She tied the carpet bag closed. We leave at first light, she said. There's one more thing, Cole said. He reached into his duster and brought out a folded piece of paper. Found this nailed to the livery post an hour ago. She opened it. 4 words in block print, no signature. Leave the papers behind. She set it down on the desk, the one where her students learned long division and river poems, and she looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then she blew out the lamp. First light, she said again. They rode out before the sun cleared the hills. Nora had 3 things with her, the carpet bag, a canteen, and the small knife that could not actually help her but felt better than nothing. Cole had his horse, a rifle in the scabbard, and whatever he carried inside him that he had not yet told her. The town of Crow Hollow was still sleeping when they passed through it, the leaning church, Harlan's shuttered store, Pete Allen's office dark, and she did not look back, because looking back was a habit she had broken a long time ago. The first hours were good. The land opened wide and flat to the west, red and dry and enormous in the way that the territory always managed to be when you were moving across it with urgency, as if the distance itself was aware of your deadline and stretching out in response. Cole rode without talking, which suited her. She did not need conversation. She needed miles. They made 12 before the trouble found them. It came from the north, 2 riders, moving fast, closing the distance at an angle that said they hadn't stumbled onto the road by accident. Cole saw them before Nora did. She knew because she saw his shoulders change, a small adjustment, a settling in, the way a man looks when he has shifted from one mode of being into another. Keep moving, he said. Same pace. They're going to cut us off. Probably stay close. The riders closed. 2 men in range clothes, not the kind you'd notice in any cattle town, which was the point. One had a brim pulled low, the other had a face like a hatchet, narrow, specific, not kind. They pulled up across the road about 40 yards ahead and sat there, and the message of 2 men sitting across a road was as clear as anything written on paper. Morning, Cole said when they reached speaking distance. The hatchet-faced one looked at Nora, specifically at the bag on her saddle. We'll be taking that, he said. Which part? Cole said. The man looked at him. Don't be funny. Not trying to be. I'm asking which part you think belongs to you, because as far as I can see, the lady's bag is the lady's bag, and there's nothing on this road that's yours. The other man's hand moved toward his hip. It was a slow move, the kind made by someone who didn't expect to have to complete it. Cole's rifle came up from the scabbard in the same instant that his horse stepped left, putting himself between Nora and the 2 riders, and the geometry of it, the angle, the speed, said clearly that this was not his first calculation of this kind. Here's the choice, Cole said. His voice was the same as it had been across a Harlan's counter talking about peaches. Level, matter of fact. You ride north and you tell whoever sent you that the road was empty. Or we find out which one of you is faster, and I'll be honest with you, neither of you is fast enough for that to go well. Silence, the flat kind where decisions are being made. The hatchet-faced man looked at Cole's rifle. He looked at Nora. He looked at the rifle again. They turned and rode north. Nora exhaled. She had not known she was holding it. "They'll be back," Cole said, sliding the rifle back into the scabbard. "With more." "How many more?" "Creed doesn't send 2 men to close something. He sends 2 men to find out what they're dealing with." He looked at her. "Now he knows." They pushed the horses harder after that. The land changed as they moved west, less red, more gray. The terrain getting rougher and more folded as the foothills of the far range came up slowly on the horizon. By midday they had crossed into canyon country, the road dropping between walls of stone that were cool and shadowed and smelled like something old and underground. It was beautiful, in the way things are beautiful when they might also get you killed. They stopped at a stream to water the horses, and Nora took the documents out and checked them, for no reason except that she needed to confirm they were still there, which they were. "Tell me about Creed," she said. "Not the crimes, the man." Cole looked at the water. "Patient. Careful, runs everything through intermediaries so nothing touches him directly. The forged deeds, the payments to the judge, none of it has his name on it. That's why your father's copies are valuable. He annotated them, linked the chain. And the judge. Is he still on the circuit?" "Far as I know." Cole paused. "Creed won't let this get to the marshal if he can help it, not because he thinks he'll lose, because he doesn't want the question asked at all. He's afraid. Powerful men always are. They just hide it under other things." She thought about that. She thought about her father, careful and meticulous, and in the end outrun by a fear he had not expected to be so fast. She put the documents back. They rode another 6 miles before the canyon road narrowed to a passage barely wide enough for 2 horses abreast, and that was where the third man was waiting. Not 2 men this time. 1. Standing in the road on foot, no horse visible, hat in his hand, and Nora recognized him with a jolt that moved through her like cold water. It was the county clerk from the documents, the one named in her father's handwriting as the man who had accepted payment. His name was Donald Birch, and he looked like a man who had not slept in several nights and was not expecting sleep any time soon. "I need to talk," Birch said. His voice cracked on the second word. "I need to talk before this goes any further." Cole's hand was near the rifle. Nora put her hand on his arm once, a small pressure. "Then talk," she said. Donald Birch talked for a long time. He stood in the narrowed road with his hat in both hands, and he told them what he knew, which was more than Nora had expected and more than Cole had hoped. The forged deeds were only part of it. Creed had been running a scheme for 5 years, inflating land valuations, selling parcels that did not legally exist, collecting payments from investors in the eastern states who had never set foot in the territory and were trusting maps that bore no relationship to the actual ground. The county clerk's office had been the mechanism. Birch had been the tool. He did not say that last part. Nora said it for him. He did not disagree. "How much of this is documented?" Cole asked. "I kept copies," Birch said. "Everything, every transaction." "I was afraid of Creed, but I was more afraid of—" He stopped, tried again. "I have a daughter, she's 9. I kept everything because I thought someday it would matter." "Where are the copies?" Nora said. "Clayfield, at the bank." "In a locked box." He looked at her directly for the first time. "I was on my way there when Creed's men came for me. I got away, but I can't go back, and I can't go forward alone." Nora looked at Cole. The arithmetic of the situation was simple. 1 woman, 1 man who used to ride for the enemy, 1 frightened clerk with evidence in a bank box 60 miles away, and somewhere behind them a patient, careful man who ran everything through intermediaries and did not like questions. Asked about him. "You ride with us," she said to Birch. "We get to Clayfield, we get your copies, we find the marshal, and we put everything in front of him together." "Creed will know," Birch said. "He has people in Clayfield." "He has people everywhere," Nora said. "That doesn't seem to have stopped us yet." They found Birch's horse hidden in a slot canyon off the main road, and they rode the last 30 miles of the day as 3, the mountains ahead of them getting larger as the sun went lower, the sky going the color of a bruise from the west. They made camp without fire. Nora took the first watch. She sat against a boulder at the edge of camp and listened to the dark and thought about her father. Not the man who had run, not the man who had left her a carpet bag full of consequences, but the earlier one, the one who had sat at a kitchen table when she was a girl and told her that the only thing a person could control was whether they chose to be honest when it cost something. It had cost him everything. She had spent 3 years being angry about that. She was still angry, but it sat differently now, the anger not like a wall between her and the thing she was carrying, but like a fuel. Cole came and sat beside her when Birch was asleep. They did not speak for a while. "You could have kept going," she said. "When you told me about my father, you could have told me and ridden on." "Yes," he said. "Why didn't you?" He looked at the dark for a long moment. "Because going was easy. And easy stopped being enough for me about 2 years ago." He paused. "And because Wade Calloway deserved someone finishing what he started, even if that someone had no right to be the one to do it." She thought about trust again, the arithmetic, what it cost, what it bought. She thought about a man who had done wrong and knew it and came back anyway, not to erase it, because you could not erase those things, but to place himself between the consequence and the person least responsible for bearing it. That was not nothing. That was not nothing at all. "We'll reach Clayfield by noon tomorrow," she said, "if nothing stops us." "Nothing is going to stop us," she said. She said it the way you say things that you are deciding to be true. Cole looked at her. In the dark, his face was unreadable. But there was something in the way he did not look away, a steadiness, a staying, that said more than whatever words he might have chosen. The night passed. Dawn came cold and pale, and they were already riding when it did. They made Clayfield with the sun still climbing. The marshal was there, a weathered man named Calvin Holt, who had seen enough of the territory to have stopped being surprised by any particular piece of it, but who leaned forward in his chair when Nora laid the documents on his desk, and leaned further when Birch set down his own copies alongside them, and was fully upright and stone-still by the time Cole had finished telling him the chain. Holt read for a long time. He read the way men read when they are committing things to memory, not just absorbing them. "Victor Creed," he said when he finished. "Yes," Cole said. Holt was quiet for a moment. Outside the office window, Clayfield moved through its ordinary Tuesday. A cart pulled by a gray mule, two women talking outside the dry goods, a boy chasing a dog that did not want to be caught. "This will take time," Holt said. "Federal courts don't move fast." "Creed has lawyers." "Do you have enough?" Nora asked. Holt looked at the papers, at Birch's copies, at the annotations in Wade Calloway's small, careful handwriting. "More than enough," he said. Nora sat back. The thing in her chest, the thing that had been wound tight for 3 years, tight and watchful and waiting, let go by one small degree. It was not finished. Creed would fight. Lawyers would argue. It would take time, and probably more difficulty than any of them could predict. But the documents were on the desk of a federal marshal in a locked office, and Donald Birch was giving a written statement, and Cole Durrant was telling everything he knew without conditions or exceptions. It was started. It would not stop now. Afterward, outside in the street, Nora stood in the mid-morning light and breathed. The mountains were visible to the north, and the sky was the particular deep blue that only happens in high country, and for the first time in 3 years she looked at a sky without looking for weather coming in it. Cole came and stood beside her. She did not move away. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Don't know yet," he said. "You go back to Crow Hollow," she said. "I have 7 students and a poem about rivers they haven't finished memorizing." He looked at her, that staying look again. "Crow Hollow's not a bad place," he said. "No," she said. "It isn't." She looked at the mountains. She thought about the schoolhouse, the leaning church, the 43 people who did not fully know her yet. She thought about how trust was not a door you opened once and left open, but a thing you chose, again and again, in the small daily moments that did not feel like choices until you looked back and saw the shape they had made. She thought about a dark horse the color of old charcoal and a man who had told the truth when lying would have been simpler, and who had placed himself on the right side of a road he had no obligation to stand on. "Ride back with me," she said. It was not a question. He looked at the mountains. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. They rode out of Clayfield in the early afternoon, the road long and red ahead of them, the sky enormous and clean, Crow Hollow somewhere in the distance waiting like something worth returning to. Her father's last act was on a marshal's desk. The anger that had lived in her for 3 years was still there. It would be there for a long time, she suspected, reshaped but not gone, the way grief reshapes without disappearing. But alongside it, something new had taken up space. Not trust exactly, not yet. Trust was an arithmetic that took time to complete, but the willingness to begin the calculation. She rode, and the road opened ahead of her, and Cole Durrant rode beside her, and the territory spread out in every direction. enormous and red and full of everything that was still possible. It was enough. For now, it was more than enough.